Okay, so before I, move ahead and create my building, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go within ArtRage 2, and I'm going to sketch out what it is I'm actually going to be creating. So I went ahead and made a ruler, and I mean, even though I already have my image size kind of given for me, I always like to create myself a kind of like a limitation or box to kind of work within. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw myself out a box. And all I'm really doing is I'm just grabbing the ends of the ruler here, and I'm just holding shift as I do that just to kind of snap it to a certain degree that I'm actually looking forward to. So all I'm doing right now is just kind of drawing that main wall that I was that I made earlier, the layout for. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw out a few details that I'm going to want to model into it. So this is the main wall, and what's going to happen here is this entire center is going to be sticking out of the wall just slightly, not too much. Now what's going to happen here is this is going to be sort of like divided in half, and then there's going to be the main arch over here. There's going to be these two grand pillars that are going to be held up by I'm guessing maybe some like lion statues or something like that. So I think I'm gonna make that in like between Moto and ZBrush, or maybe just ZBrush. I don't know. I haven't really decided yet. And then what's gonna happen here is like earlier we had two arches within the main wall. I'm gonna keep those, but I'm going to change them a little bit because what's gonna happen is there's going to be a few steps going into the wall, and then you're gonna have those two arches kind of embedded in the wall, and then there's going to be a few steps obviously working their way out of the wall itself. There's going to be a few more pillars over here, and then there's going to be a few statues embedded in the wall as well, like that. And of course towards the top I'm going to leave this area sort of blank because I actually want areas where I can concentrate my detail on. I want some larger volumes where I can just leave, and I can basically just texture bricks in there. It's just going to look nicer in the end, just because it's not going to be fully. It's not just going to look like a bunch of noise in the end. So, and here I'm going to have more arches, of course, and then this whole thing will be sort of there's going to be a bunch of rocks kind of covering some of these elements out, maybe some stuff on the side as well. I don't know, but basically that's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a big wall. This, I really should change the, okay. So I'm looking for like a big section here, a big volume that is kind of like extruded or extended out of the wall, large volume with bricks, and then some smaller detail parts, that are just kind of working their way in. A few arches, statues, and stuff like that. And then here is where the stairs are going to go. So I think now I can make my way back into Moto and start working on the building. Now, before I use my assets here into my to actually build a building from, what I'm going to need is I'm going to need to construct the actual volumes for the building. So I'm just going to go back into my model view, and I'm going to jump back into my layout scene. So here I'm just going to select if I actually turn it on, I'm going to select the object that I want to work on, and I'm going to hide a bunch of other stuff that I don't need. Actually, I need that, and I don't need a lot of that. So I can move that out of the way. And now we're going to need a big archway here, and then these two arches as well. But for now, this is just going to get in the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete all that, and I'm going to fill this polygon in. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start splitting this to give me some landmarks of where I'm going to want to work. So all I'm really doing right now is just splitting and beveling. Now I'm just going to extrude that out, or bevel it out. This as well. Oh. Like that. So now this overhang, of course, is going to be held up by two pillars, so I might actually want to move it out a little bit more. And now what I want to do is I want to create a cylinder to cut into this, to give me a nice big arch. So I'm just going to select the cylinder. I'm going to grow it out. Now, of course, you don't see it until I go into the side view. So I can just pull that out. That is fairly well aligned, and it's not perfectly in the center, but that's okay because I can just move it like that. And now what I want to do is something that I've done before, which is to select that and do that. Okay, so now that I've done that, what I can do is select these polygons here, move them down, and now there's going to be pillars here, so I'm guessing what I really should have done is just shrink this a tiny little bit. Now the arch is going to be smaller, but at least there's going to be more room for the pillars. And of course, when we go to the side view, that's pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to select this. I'm going to go to slice and dice. I'm going to go back into the Seneca Menard's, Boolean script, and I'm just going to choose solid 3D drill. That's going to give me that. And now I'm going to delete any polygons I don't need. And I'm going to start bridging. Now, before I start bridging, what you might notice here is that I have a bunch of edges here. Now, I really should delete them because I'm actually going to show you a case where if I hadn't deleted the edge in the middle, in this case, when I bridge this arch and this arch, there's going to be this in the middle that's going to get in my way. So I'm going to show you in a sec. Now, what you'll notice is that this is a very clean bridge, right? And there's absolutely nothing in the middle here. So if I do this now, I select that and I deselect these edges here so that I bridge this edge network and that edge network. Now if I bridge between them, what you might notice is if I actually delete that and that, and then if I select this polygon here and move it up, there's a hole here. Reason being is that the bridge tool literally took this edge here and connected it up with, or bridged right up to this edge here, disregarding this right here. Now, the reason why I wanted to delete that edge over here is because, for example, if I do something like this, where I'm going to want to, I guess let's skip that edge, or I want to do something like that, the split here, and I want to connect this with this, what's going to happen is Modo is going to get confused in most cases, and as you can see, it's not connecting, it's not drawing a split. So the one way to fix that, of course, is to just delete this polygon and fill it in. And now this polygon includes all these vertices here, and not just, basically the connection for this polygon is, or the edge network goes from here to here to here to here. And of course, now that this polygon includes all the surrounding data, I can actually split that. So I'm just going to fill this polygon in here as well. And all I'm doing is just double clicking on an edge, like anywhere on the border, and then pressing F or actually P is the default hotkey for filling in a polygon. And then I'm just splitting in, across like that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this down a little bit because that arch was way too big. And I'm actually going to move this down a little bit as well. And I'm going to extrude some of this, but before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to split some of that like that. Now the reason why I'm going to do that is because there's going to be an object, or there's going to be a bunch of polygons sticking out here. There's going to be a hole here, and then I'm going to fill this in with another arch, but a pre-created one. So I'm just going to select that, and I'm just going to work my way across like that, and that's pretty good. Or you know what, I'm actually going to go the opposite way. Reason for that is now it's going to automatically put my division exactly at the opposite of where I had it before. So now I can select this, all this stuff here, and I can just bevel upwards. like that. So now if I go back into my assets, what I can do is I can just place an arch in here and then just fill in that gap with that. So these volumes are pretty good. I think I'm going to be happy with this, and then I can actually start working in the details now. Now, I took a little pause over there, and then what I've done is I've deleted this extra wall piece that was sticking out of here, and then just bridged these polygons together. So now what we want to do is we want to fill this in, or put in some arcs here, and some columns. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back over to my assembly file, like here, and I'm going to copy this object here, and I'm just going to hit copy, go back to my layout file, select this object here, and I'm just going to paste. Now with this pasted, what I can do now is just move it over to where I need it to be, scale it up a bunch, and I'm actually going to just move this into the corner here, and then with my scale tool selected, I'm just going to put it somewhere right along the corner, and I'm just going to scale it from there. Now when I scale, if you're not getting the a very accurate amount that you're looking for, that's okay. You just go in here in your tool properties, just hit the this to make sure it's equal, and then hit control, and then just do the same thing that we did earlier with the stairs. So just get a more kind of accurate reading in your numbers. So that's pretty good. Okay, cool. So now we can move that back into here, like that. And then we can copy this object again, and just make sure it's just to give us a few more arcs within here, just like an extra layer. So I'm going to pick the same spot again, that one right there, and now I'm just going to keep scaling until I have 3 arcs now in here. So now I'm going to hit equal again, and I'm going to hit control. I'm just going to scale down until I get something like this. And you know what, even if I'm extending just a tiny little bit out of there, that's perfectly okay. Now that I have that, what I can do is I can just convert my selection. I probably shouldn't have done that. I guess I could move the whole thing here. Whole thing up here. I'm going to convert the selection, move this up, select this whole thing again, convert the selection, deselect these vertices, and move these up here. The reason why I'm going to do this is because I'm going to put 2 columns right along here. So, you know what? Before I do that, I'm actually going to just move this forward until it meets up with this wall here, like that. And now I'm going to go back into my other scene, which is, my asset scene. I'm going to pick this thing right here, select all the polygons here, just hit copy. And once I'm copied, I'm just going to go right back in here, select this object, hit paste, and of course my object's going to be all the way up there, so I'm just going to move it into location, and just shrink it a little bit, and place it exactly how I want it. Now in this case the scale is okay, so I'm just going to move this cylinder. I'm actually just going to scale it from here vertically, and of course again, if you're not getting the exact reading that you want, just do it in here, and you could hit control and get a much more accurate reading. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all this, duplicate or clone, and of course you should use the handle, that way you know that you're moving exactly, that your movement is snapped. And I'm just going to move that a little bit back until it fits in here, and that's pretty good. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to move or clone this or mirror it over here. But of course, before we do that, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I delete anything I don't need. So, deselect everything that you do want and just hit delete. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to deselect this just because I want it. And I'm going to delete that, and that's all good. So now I'm just going to select that, Okay, so now I got that. I'm just going to hit mirror, hit that, and you know what? I'm actually going to offset it. Reason being is just because Moto tends to have this snap, towards the origin, and it does get annoying since this model is actually off origin a little bit. So, and of course, doing this manually is faster just because you get better feedback that way. So now we have something like that, and that's pretty good. So you know what? Before we finish this area here, I'm just going to make this wall a little bit thinner. I think it's going to look better. Move it a little bit forward, and then select all this stuff here, and this, and move it forward as well. So just going to look out for that. Make sure it doesn't penetrate. And you can usually tell right along here. That's pretty good. So now we can look at it from here, and I'm kind of liking this. All right, let's go back to our assets. Now, copying and pasting between all these layers has been actually quite annoying. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut all of this, and I'm going to paste it into one layer. This way I just won't have to switch between layers all the time. So now we're going to be working on our entrance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the objects that I'm going to be using for that. And there are these two. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right back into the layout file. I'm going to choose this object that I want to work on, and I'm going to paste the objects. I'm going to turn on my wireframe. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place the archway for now. What do I call them, archways? But anyways. Okay. So that's getting pretty close, but not quite there yet. I should really just scale it a little bit more. Like that. Okay. So now this is going, now for this object, for the next object actually, for the actual entrance, what I'm going to have to do in my case is that these two objects are actually welded. So I'm going to have to cut and just paste it right back, and now they are completely separate. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale this up a bit, like that. Maybe a little bit down just to make sure, that the entrance isn't too big. Okay. So we got something like that, and it works for now. Now I'm gonna move it back to just align it with the arch. And then what I'm going to do is it actually aligned? Okay, cool. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to move all that stuff a little bit upwards. Move the legs downward a little bit, like that. And now the only thing left for me to do, really, I guess what I could do is probably just delete half of this stuff because I really don't need both sides. So now that I got that done, I'm just going to make sure I move all this stuff into position, like that. And that's not too bad, but you know what? I'm really not a fan of how all this is not aligning just yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale it up a bit and just, try to place it and get it working without me actually having to, readjust any of all this stuff manually. So that works pretty good. Now the only thing left for me to do is just scale this up and realign it here, and then hopefully it's going to be aligned, fairly well. But in this case, it's not really. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all these objects here, extend them a little bit. Actually, extend that separately. And that's much better. Okay, last move. Okay, there we go. So now the only thing that's left for me to do is just mirror this over and basically just merge it, at the middle. So I'm just going to mirror it. And for now, that's pretty good. I guess the only thing I really should do is just manually move it. Check the distances here, so it goes past that edge. So, okay. Something like that's pretty good. And now I'm just going to grab all this and just scale it down to 0 on the X. Okay. And now what I can do is merge the vertices, and that looks pretty good. The only thing that I'm guessing I'm going to have to do now is just, I'm guessing there's, if I go here, yep, there's a bunch of normals that this object got imported with, so I'm just going to delete that. I really don't need it. And there we go. Okay, so now we got our doorway. We got pretty much everything we're looking for. And you know what? I actually think that this doorway is a little bit too wide, so I'm going to select that, convert to vertices. I'm going to deselect some of these, and I'm going to scale inwards. So that's much, much better. And a little bit down. And that works for me. Now the only other thing that's kind of left still for me to fix is this thing here. I'm guessing what I should really do is maybe just, well, actually no, I'll just do that. This way is much simpler. Okay, so all I'm doing is just selecting the polygons, converting the selection, removing it, and then just basically, where's my action center? Okay, there we go. Okay, so now we got our door. Looks like that. Next, let's go back to our asset scene here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this piece here and the column. And I'm going to copy them into the main wall like that. And we're going to decorate the front entrance a little bit. So before I do that, however, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to align these two pieces together and turn on the wireframe mode, and I'm just going to, whoop. Okay, so I'm going to move it all like that, and then scale it to fit that, like, and you know what? And again, if it doesn't fit, it's not a problem. Just press Control and use it like that. Okay, so now that we have one piece done, what we can do now is I can just go into mirror, place it like that, and that's pretty good. And now, obviously, the last thing for me to do is just to align it with the wall, place it exactly where I want it to be, and this is pretty good. Cool. So I think next what we're going to do is we're going to decorate this part here a little bit, and then perhaps maybe even divide this up a little bit, and then maybe put some details in here, and then we can start working on some other stuff. Now, looking at this, what I'm thinking is that, you know what, maybe these things are a little bit too large. Now, the reason being for that is just that there is probably going to be like a lion statue here. And now, if I put a lion statue here, and if this ornament is just a little bit too big, then what's going to happen is that this column is going to be a little bit too stubby. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the left or right view. I'm going to cut this out of here. I'm going to paste it into an empty item. And then when I go back to the main wall and I go to the front view, and I obviously need the wireframe, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select that and just move it a little bit in, like that. I'm going to do the same thing here. And as well, I'm going to eyeball the distance between here and here to make sure that they're very, very similar. And that's not too bad. That's pretty close. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go right back into this object here and just cut and paste like that. So now the only thing that's really left for me to do is to, well, first of all, delete that because I don't need it. I'm just going to mirror it back, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale this down a tiny little bit like that until, of course, it fits in here. like that. And now I can scale the column a little bit as well. And mirror, like that. And again, if it's a little bit too slow for you guys, then what you do is you just do that. And just select it after you drop the mirror tool. And then just do that. Okay, so that looks pretty. It looks a little bit nicer since all this detail is a little bit tighter and now, and you know, these heads aren't too big. And of course, now if I put in a line, this column here will not be too stubby, and you know, it's going to look nice. So yeah, so I think I'm just going to work on this part here and then just split this in half, and then maybe put in some statues over here. So now that I'm looking at this, I mean, I'm really noticing the huge faceting over here, and I'm not really liking it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all these edges here. I'm just going to hit edge loop, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bevel, and I'm going to keep beveling until the distance between all these is fairly equal. Now it's not going to be perfect, it's not a perfect solution, but you know, it is what it is. And it works, I guess. So I'm just going to select all these polygons here, do the same thing here. And I'm just going to scale up a bit on like that. Now if you're, again, not getting the result you want, just go back in here. And you know what? I probably shouldn't do that. So I'm just going to scale this axis manually, scale that axis manually. And you know what? I'm actually going to type the value here. Okay, so that's pretty good. And now I really should maybe scale up a tiny little bit just to keep this arch like that. Now, again, the whole normal issue is showing up again, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete these two things here. And that's much better. So it's a lot smoother, looks a lot nicer. And I might have to do the same thing here. You know, I'm trying to avoid it, but you know, for now, I think we can just move on to some other stuff. So I'm going to go back into this scene here, into my asset scene, and I'm going to just take this, copy it, and paste it in here. And now I'm going to scale this by quite a bit. Not too much, but you know, just enough to kind of still look as if it's within like a good you know, proportion and whatnot. So that looks okay. I'm going to then move this up to about here, maybe even this up a bunch. I'm not really sure exactly what kind of height that should be right now, but for now I just kind of want it in place. Okay, that looks okay. So I'm just going to click those and mirror them over to the other side. Now I can fix it later. Right now it's not the biggest of concerns, but for now I just kind of want things to be in, you know, pretty much where they're supposed to be. But you know what? I'm actually going to do this. It's so much more interactive this way. So I'm just looking at the space here, or even that. And that looks pretty even, so that looks okay. And now I'm going to go right back into here, grab more assets. So you know what? This time I think I'm going to grab the probably this thing here. Go back to main wall, paste. And I know it's going to be a bit of a waste, but I'm just going to do that. Like so. And of course now what I'm going to do is just move it back in there. Hide those ends, because they don't really need to be entirely visible. Like that. And you know what? I'm going to move them right along here just to kind of align all of it together. And now I'm going to just mirror it over to the other side just like I did. all the other stuff. Like that. Okay, so that's definitely starting to look a little bit more interesting. You know, the breakups, the details, and stuff like that. So I think I might want to do the same thing here. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. But you know what? Instead of reusing this same thing here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go right back into the asset file. I'm going to grab this thing here, which really all it is just this thing here, but just simplified. So I basically just extracted the center section. So I'm going to copy that, move back here, paste, and this time I'm just going to scale it up a bunch and move it in there. Like that. Okay. So now, of course, I want to move these ends, you know, extend them a little bit. So I'm just going to go right into vertex mode. Move this side, this stuff until it aligns. Do the same thing here. And now that that's done, I'm just going to go ahead and you know what? I think it might be a good idea to actually bevel some of this, just to you know, in case I need to catch any highlights and stuff like that. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to bevel all this stuff. Now I'm not really sure about UVs for this particular object, but for now, you know, I can easily redo this object. It's really not that much of an issue. Okay, so I've done that. Deleted the normals. Okay, so now I'm just going to mirror that over. Happy with how it's looking. And again, I'm just going to select that and just I don't know what the hell's going on here. Well, that's interesting. So it duplicated it, but it's keeping it all separate. Oh, right, okay, I get it. Okay. So basically what happened is I didn't necessarily copy the entire thing because some of those objects were deselected. And you know what? I'm going to look at it again. Just going to make sure it's all welded, cleaned up. And wait, and there we go. Okay. So now I'm just going to clone that. You don't always have to mirror. Cloning is just fine. And that's what we got. So I think it's pretty good for now. Just going to extend that slightly. Make sure I use the constraint handle. And I'm hoping, you know what? I'm just going to reuse this thing here on the main wall. But this time I'm going to do something similar to what I did with my other building that I showed you guys, you know, a while back. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shrink this thing here. Shrink the legs, pull them back. And actually, I'm going to extend this back a little bit. This stuff here. So that now I actually have more room to pull the legs back. So, you know, I can do this now. Okay, so now that I've done that, I can easily just go in here, scale all this stuff down a bunch. Like that. And you know what? I'm going to convert it, and I'm going to shrink that a bunch. Okay, like that. So just align it with that right there. And of course it's quite off, so I'm just going to have to make sure it's all aligned. And you know what? I might actually have to extend these two objects out a little bit more. Reason being is just, you know, I really want this thing to fit in there. So I'm just going to extend it, move it out, and just give it a little bit more room. So that looks pretty good. And now I think if I actually go back and fit this, underneath, it's going to fit quite nicely. So, you know what? I probably extended it a little bit too much, so I'm just going to go back. Go back to this view just because, you know, here I got the actual reference. And now if I move it back right up against the wall, I think I should have a nice safe amount. Okay, so, you know, it sticks out a little bit, not too much. Looks pretty good. And the only thing left for me to do now is just to duplicate this thing like so, and maybe even delete the end there. So now I can actually just merge these things together here and keep a, you know, nice distance or a nice even distance between all of them. But I guess before I do that, what I really should do is just go in here, scale it down a little bit. And you know what? I might even want to just get rid of this entirely. Pick this polygon here, move it so that I get, you know, the approximate distance that I want, and just bridge the middle. Now, granted, I obviously lost the UVs for the stuff that I deleted, but again, redoing some UVs is, you know, perfectly acceptable. So I'm just going to fill that with a polygon. Right. Okay, so I think, you know what? Instead of doing the same thing again, what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to scale this up a little bit. I think it's just going to save me a little bit of time from having to, you know, extend it once again. So now I just gotta clone it up again, move it over, and that looks great. So looking at the object, it's definitely looking a lot more interesting than it did at the beginning, that's for sure. So now I think what I'm going to do is just fill in the door here, maybe put in some moldings right up along the bottom, and maybe just fill in these holes and start working on the rocks. So now this area here looks kind of dull and boring, so I'm just going to go into my side view. I'm going to pick my pen tool, and I'm going to make sure that my options are actually turned off for now. And I'm just going to start sketching. So you know what, maybe for the first move, it might actually be a good idea to keep those options on, just to get that first straight line. And now that that is done, I'm just going to start sketching something like that. And I'm just going to go right back to those options. Or 45-degree angle here. That. And, you know, we're really after just a simple shape. Not looking for anything difficult here. Or anything complex, I mean. Now that I have that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale it down a little bit. Move it where I need it. And I'm just going to extrude this shape out of there. Okay, so I'm just going to go to extrude. Undo. Just place it in like that. Now, this is a bit too tall, so I'm actually going to just convert that, deselect the bottom, and just move the top down a bunch. Okay, so that looks good. Now I just gotta duplicate it to the other side. Like that, and that looks a lot better. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fill this in with a small little detail. And of course the perfect shape for that is, you know, just a capsule. So I'm going to draw out the capsule, and right now it doesn't look like much because quite frankly it isn't much, but of course it's being drawn out on the wrong angle, so I'm just going to change it to Y, and that looks a lot better. And the amount of segments that this is drawn with is, I think for now, fine. I have to increase the number of end segments just because I want a smaller, a smoother kind of arc over here. Now, 16 segments, or yeah, 16 segments for this is fine, just because, you know, now on my x-axis I have a very symmetrical line here. So I'm just going to drop that, and I'm going to convert it back into a regular polygon object, because when you originally make that, it's smoothed. So I'm going to go into there, and I'm going to start beveling. And yeah, I'm just going to start beveling. And I'm going to get something like that. Now, it's not exactly what I want, but that's okay. I'm just going to delete that. I'm going to connect this right like that. And like that. And now I can actually delete these. Okay. So now that that's done, all I need to do is just delete the bottom, because I don't need it. And then I just have to expand that pretty much like I did with the columns. So I'm just going to scale that down a bunch, like that. And you know what? I'm really not liking the way this vertex is sticking out, so I'm just going to pull it down a bunch. And then I'm going to take these edges, split them. And of course I made a little error in my selection. Now if I move this up, I can smooth out the arc, which is very nice now. So now that I have that, I'm just going to move it out for the moment, just because now that I moved it out and I look at my side view, I can easily select exactly what I want, pull it out like that, and I got myself a nice capsule. So the only thing for me left for me to do is, of course, just intersect it with the object, make a duplicate version of it, and just paste it in here. So this is just kind of like my backup tool. And now that I have this, I'm just going to run Seneca's script. But actually, before I do that, what I really should do is I should just select the tool and the cutting object and cut them out of there and paste them in. Now, the reason why I did that is because, now when I run a Boolean tool, it doesn't have to evaluate all these pillars and columns and any other junk that I might not necessarily want to evaluate. So now that I got the wall isolated and this cutting tool, I'm just gonna go in here, solid drill, and I got something like that, which looks perfectly acceptable. So I got that, and now I'm just gonna cut it right back into the main wall, and of course I still got my object that I want to use, so I'm just gonna cut that as well. I'm gonna paste it in here, and this will be pretty easy. So all I gotta do is I just gotta do something like that, cut, and of course this is inverted, so I'm just going to go in there, invert the polygons like that, move them a little bit more to the front, and of course I have to make sure that my action center is back to automatic. So I'm going to click here, double click here, deselect any edges that I don't need. In this case, it's fairly simple. I just got to make sure that these two arcs are connected. So now I'm going to bridge. I get that. Fill this with a polygon, and now I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. Like that. Okay, perfect. And you know what? I'm just going to clean this edge here as well. Just because, I don't know, I just wanted a quad hit there. So now, of course, my normals are screwed up again, so I'm just going to go right back. I'm going to delete that just to clean up my normals. And of course, the only thing left for me to do is just to cut across the middle. So I'm going to extract that like that. And now I'm going to just make sure I make a selection right across the middle. Like that. This is split right around 50%, which is perfect. Gonna do that. And that looks good. Okay. So now I can easily just delete that and just mirror it. So now that I got that, I'm just going to use the rigid snap tool again. It is coming very, very handy as of late. And you know what? Probably the better thing for me to do is just select the middle edges only. That way I know that nothing else will be, merged. So in this case, I can just keep merging, keep dragging in the viewport until the entire middle is merged, and that's fine. And that looks good. So now I got, some place to put statues in. My wall is perfectly symmetrical. That's all nice and good. And you know what? I'm just going to delete those edges because I don't want them anymore. And yeah, so that pretty much wraps it up for the building. I mean, there really isn't that much left to do on the building itself. Except obviously UVing and stuff like that, and then texturing. So, I think as soon as I head over to ZBrush and make my statues, I'm just going to place them in here. I'm not really going to do too much more on the building itself because, quite frankly, I still got the rocks to do. Get this thing finished and maybe do something to the ground as well. So, for now, the building is done. Very simple. Really not that much to it. And it looks like that. Now, if I actually, before I finish, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to render try. I'm going to make sure that all this is visible within here like that. Okay. And the way I'm rendering here is that my light, if I actually select this and I go to my properties, I selected physical sun, I set my time, and then I went to environment. And under environment, if you expand this right here, just make sure that for environment type you just choose physically based daylight. And of course, under the render options, enable GI. For this, you really don't need to play too much with this, maybe with the anti-aliasing, maybe, but that's really it. And then under here, just set your, frame size. Because right now all we're going to do is just preview this object, so I'm just going to hit render, see what I get. And, it is, of course, recording and rendering it at the same time, but it's still pretty fast, as you can see. Of course, some of our objects actually still have the UV tag on it. So anyway, so that's our object for now. The next part is just to work on the rocks, cover up the building, maybe fill in the door, and put in the statues, and that'll be pretty much it for that. And then paint it. So I've went ahead and moved a bunch of items around, primarily these rocks, for example. They were much lower on the building, and these ones were actually right about here. So I've taken this arch as well, and I've widened it a little bit and made the arch actually start a little bit lower, because before you couldn't even see it. This wall just kept running up and up and up. And as soon as we start working on these rocks over here and here, and as soon as we start giving them a little bit more frequency and just some nicer shape, because right now, I mean, this is just a block, so it's just a stand-in. I think this is going to start coming alive a little bit more. And of course, I mean, as soon as we start also adding some bot map and maybe even some color, then this thing's just going to pop a lot more. Obviously it could also use some statues, so that's still to come.